History often has shadows. It has hidden corners and whispered stories. Some are so dark, they are buried deep beneath the surface of what we are taught in schools. In the vast, complicated history of World War II, many tales of heroism and sacrifice are told. But there are other stories. Stories of unimaginable cruelty. Stories that nations try to forget. Japan, known for its rich culture and disciplined society, holds one of the darkest secrets of the 20th century. It remained hidden for decades, protected by a wall of silence and denial. A chilling chapter many still do not know exists. A place where science was twisted into a weapon of pure evil. A top-secret project that defied all human decency. During the war, while the world watched battles unfold on land, sea, air, something else was happening in a remote corner of occupied China. A program of human experimentation so horrific, it rivals the atrocities committed by the Nazis in Europe. Doctors, sworn to heal, became tormentors. Human beings treated as nothing more than raw materials for research. The story of Unit 731. A warning from the past, echoing into our present. So, what exactly was Unit 731? On the surface, it had an innocent-sounding name. Its official title was the Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification Department of the Kwantung Army. This name was a deliberate deception. It was a mask designed to hide a horrifying reality. The world was meant to believe it was a public health unit, working to prevent disease, provide clean water for soldiers, civilians. This clever disguise allowed it to operate in plain sight, its true purpose known only to a select few within the highest levels of the Japanese Imperial Army. It was a lie that cost thousands of lives. In truth, Unit 731 was a covert biological and chemical warfare research and development unit. Its real mission was the exact opposite of its public name. It was not about preventing epidemics. It was about creating them. The unit was tasked with developing the world's most terrifying weapons of mass destruction: bubonic plague, cholera, anthrax, typhoid. Their goal was to find the most effective ways to spread these diseases among enemy populations, military, civilian. Every monstrous operation has a leader. For Unit 731, that leader was a man named Shiro Ishii. Ishii was a brilliant but twisted army medical officer and microbiologist. He was the mastermind, the driving force behind the entire program. From a young age he was ambitious. He saw biological warfare as his path to power and prestige within the Imperial Army. He traveled to Europe, the United States, studying the biological weapons programs of other nations. He returned to Japan convinced this was the future of warfare, and that he was the man to lead Japan's efforts. Ishii was a charismatic and persuasive figure. He successfully lobbied the highest levels of the military, convincing them to fund his dark vision. He argued that Japan, a nation with limited natural resources, needed an unconventional weapon to compete with its larger, more industrialized enemies. Biological weapons, he claimed, were the perfect solution. They were cheap to produce and could cause catastrophic damage. With the full backing of the War Ministry, Ishii was given a blank check to build his research empire. He became the commander of Unit 731. To conduct his work, Shiro Ishii needed a secure, isolated location. He found it in the countryside of northeast China, then under Japanese occupation as Manchukuo. Near Harbin, in Pingfang, the Japanese army built a massive, sprawling complex. It became the headquarters of Unit 731. From the air, it looked like a small city. The compound covered more than 6 square kilometers. It consisted of over 150 buildings, power plants, laboratories, prisons, crematoriums, an airfield, a railway line, a state-of-the-art death factory. The central buildings housed the laboratories. Scientists bred fleas to carry the plague, vats of anthrax, vats of cholera. There were chambers designed to test the effects of frostbite. There were chambers designed to test the effects of decompression. But the most terrifying part was a heavily fortified building at its heart. This was the prison where human test subjects were held. These prisoners were the raw material for the unit's experiments. They were kept in cells, waiting to be chosen for the next study. The entire Pingfang facility was designed for maximum security and secrecy. It was surrounded by high walls, electric fences, armed guard towers. Local Chinese villagers were told it was a lumber mill. The experiments conducted at Unit 731 represent, some of the most depraved acts ever committed in the name of science. The researchers were primarily interested in how diseases affected the human body, so they could better weaponize them. To do this, they performed live vivisections, often without anesthesia. Prisoners were intentionally infected with diseases like plague, typhoid, cholera. The scientists would then cut them open while they were still alive to observe the step-by-step effects of the disease on their internal organs. This was done to understand the progression of the infection in a living human system. Another major area of research was testing the limits of human endurance. Some were placed in high-pressure chambers until their eyes popped out of their sockets. Others were exposed to extreme cold, limbs frozen with liquid nitrogen and then thawed to study frostbite and gangrene. They were spun in giant centrifuges to see how much G-force a human could withstand before death. They were deprived of food and water to determine the limits of survival. Every experiment ended in the death of the subject. The unit also conducted horrific weapons testing on live human targets. Prisoners were tied to stakes in open fields, germ bombs, chemical weapons, flamethrowers. They were used on them from varying distances. The scientists would stand by in protective gear, taking notes on the effectiveness of their weapons. They meticulously documented how long it took for the victims to die and the horrific injuries they sustained. These field tests were designed to perfect the delivery systems for their biological arsenal, ensuring maximum casualties when deployed against enemy cities or troops. Life, if it could even be called that for a prisoner inside Unit 731, was just a living nightmare. From the very moment they arrived, they were stripped of their names and given only a number. They were no longer people. They were specimens. The prisoners were a mix of Chinese civilians and soldiers' Russian captives, a small number of Allied prisoners of war. Often, they were captured by the Kempeitai, the Japanese military police, on trumped-up charges of spying or resistance. They were told they were being taken to a labor camp, but their true destination was the prison block at the heart of the Pingfang complex. The prison was, honestly, a place of absolute despair. The cells were small, cold, and dark. The prisoners were fed just enough to keep them alive for the experiments. They lived in constant fear, never knowing when their cell door would open and they'd be led away to a laboratory. They could hear the screams of others echoing through the corridors. They knew that no one who entered the labs ever came back. The victims of Unit 731 were not just those who died inside the labs. The horror spread far beyond the walls of the Pingfang complex. One of the unit's key missions was to test their biological weapons in the real world. They conducted field trials on an enormous scale, deliberately starting epidemics in Chinese cities and villages. They would drop porcelain bombs, filled with plague-infested fleas, from airplanes over populated areas. They would contaminate wells and rivers with cholera and typhoid. These attacks were designed to study the spread of disease and to terrorize the Chinese population. These biological attacks killed an astonishing number of people. Conservative estimates suggest that at least 200,000 to 300,000 Chinese civilians died from these man-made plagues. Entire villages were wiped out. The Japanese army would often cordon off an area after infecting it, trapping the residents inside to die, while the scientists observed the results. The suffering was immense. People died slow, agonizing deaths from diseases they did not understand. Local doctors were helpless to stop the outbreaks. It was a silent, invisible form of warfare that left a trail of death across the Chinese countryside. As World War II drew to a close in August 1945, the staff of Unit 731 knew their time was up. With the Soviet army advancing rapidly into Manchuria, Shiro Ishii gave the order to destroy all evidence. They dynamited the main buildings of the Pingfang complex. They burned thousands of pages of research documents and photographs. They killed the remaining prisoners to ensure there would be no witnesses. The staff was given vials of poison and told to commit suicide if they were captured. Most of the staff, however, managed to escape. Ishii and his top scientists fled back to Japan, carrying with them the most valuable data from their years of human experimentation. After Japan surrendered, American occupation forces began to investigate rumors of Japan's biological warfare program. They soon located Shiro Ishii and his key lieutenants. Instead of being arrested and tried for war crimes, Ishii and his team were offered a deal. In a cold calculation of Cold War politics, the United States government made a secret pact with the monsters of Unit 731. American military intelligence was desperate to learn about the Soviet Union's biological weapons capabilities. They saw the data from Unit 731's human experiments as priceless. Such research could never be conducted in the United States in exchange for all their data. The detailed records of their vivisections, the disease studies and the weapons tests. The United States granted Shiro Ishii and all of his top commanders full immunity from prosecution for war crimes. This deal meant that the men responsible for the torture and murder of thousands were never brought to justice. While Nazi doctors were being tried and hanged at Nuremberg for similar crimes, the doctors of Unit 731 walked free,